Thank you for joining us today and welcome to Louis Lessons, a virtual conversation concert series featuring esteemed pianist, raconteur, and KCH favorite, Louis Nagel. This series has been generously funded by seasoned underwriters Maurice and Linda Binko. This presentation is free, but please consider supporting our world-class artists and our Carytown Concert House by making your own gift at carytownconcerthouse.com/donate. Enjoy the program. Later. So here we are, Louis and Tyler. We are doing a Zoom Louis lesson today. Tyler, I've asked you to come along, and I'm going to introduce you to everyone, although I think most of our patrons will recognize you as our wonderful Wine, Women, and Song music director and accompanist. But Tyler is much more than that. He is on the faculty of the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, where he plays for the music theater and dance departments. And he also is a lecturer of theory. And one more thing, he did postgraduate private study with Louis Nagel. And I thought, who better to invite to join this Zoom conversation lesson than Tyler Driskill. Louis, I'm so delighted that you are willing to do this unconventional Louis lesson this time. And how do you want to start? You want to start by playing something for us?
No, why don't we start with the conversation? Because I'm sure, I suspect that if Tyler is going to ask me some questions, that my mind will start working and have more examples than you really need to illustrate a simple question. So why don't we start with a question or comment or whatever you're going to throw at me, Tyler. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, so many of the questions that I that thought of posing to you are related to rep, and I was curious what you might present today as sort of a way of guiding the conversation.
Well, this has been a Mozart series, and uh, I'm going to focus a little bit on the A minor sonata, and I'm going to include in focusing on the A minor sonata something that would be very relevant, Julie's wonderful book, Melodies of the Mind, which has a large chapter about the A minor sonata and its relationship to Mozart, which I want to talk about, but also because it's such a unique piece. It's one of two pieces that he wrote in the key of A minor. Now, I have a feeling that most people listening to that, if they're not musical, would let that wash over them with very little reaction. I mean, who cares what key it's in and whether he used A minor twice or 40 times or whatever. But what's interesting, if you are a musician, is that A minor is a key that's very accessible to all musical instruments at the time, and the relative minor of C major. And C major is everybody's first key. They don't have to know that it's one of the hardest keys to play in if you're a pianist.
There are no black notes to guide you. You don't have any landmarks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And your fingers have to be curved evenly rather than reaching out for the black keys. Our hands are shaped so that the 2, 3, and 4 can reach for the black keys, and the shorter thumb and fifth finger can reach for the white keys. So Chopin was very wise in teaching the first scale, B major, which fits the hand absolutely gorgeously.
You know, I was thinking back to the first time I met you, Louis, and it was actually at my freshman jury when I was at Michigan. And I barely remember what I played. I think I played a Debussy prelude, maybe a set of Beethoven variations. But I remember my teacher, Lynn Bartholomew, called me over after I played, and she said, "Louis, you need to see his hands. They look just like yours." I don't know if it was the shape or the curvature or whatever, but she was reminded of your hands.
Did you miss the same notes that I miss?
That's great.
It's interesting, but the idea that a key would be of interest to the public is somewhat foreign. Uh,
So
I,
you're saying that of all of his compositions, he only composed two pieces in A minor,
I'm moving the piano bench
or
back
for the piano, for the piano, or for everything.
now so that I can play for you a little bit. The opening of the Mozart Sonata, which is from the year 1778, that's pretty fiery. And it sounds a little bit more like, sounds a little bit more like the Prokofiev toccata with that riveting jackhammer left hand.
Hmm.
He never, to my knowledge, in the piano, even in the concertos, never did that.
Hmm.
Later on, and we'll talk a little bit about the circumstances around that, but this is singular. This is sui generis among his works. I think the year was about 1787 when he wrote this A minor piece. I think that's correct. What a difference!
Mm.
What a difference!
That's pretty remarkable. That was actually on a short list of pieces that I had considered requesting from you today, but I thought, oh my goodness, that's just it's so melancholy. It's one of my one of my favorite compositions, but it's so melancholy.
I'm embarrassed to tell you, I mean, I did that from memory. I'm not sure that I played the right sequence of events at the very beginning. I think I can hear every note of that piece, but I have never practiced it to perform it. And you know, both those pieces, I'll tell you about the sonata in a minute, but this rondo, I have not played because I never felt depth in me enough to play it.
Mm.
I think now I could probably do it some justice. I'm not being self-deprecating. That piece is so deeply beautiful and melancholy, and its circumstances, he was writing to friends for money.
Hmm.
He was having success with operas, but he was writing to friends for money because it wasn't going. He was no longer a child prodigy.
Louis, do you think that there are connections between Mozart's selections of minor keys for some of these pieces and personal tragedy? I'm sure you'll touch on what was going on when he wrote the A minor sonata,
Well,
but pieces
definitely.
like the E minor violin sonata and then the gorgeous B minor adagio that you shared a couple of classes ago, which you actually introduced me to. Do you feel that those are
Did we
connected?
work on that?
We
Did we
did.
work? Yeah.
I did not know that piece until you introduced it to me,
I
and
love
it's
to
one of my
teach that
favorite.
piece, and I love to play it. No one that I've ever read has explained, I was going to say justified, but it justifies itself, but explained why did he write this? And there is a specific date of its appearance, March 20 something, 70. I don't remember exactly, but it's not, the sonata comes from the summer of 1778. But the B minor adagio comes on a specific day. Did he write that in one day? I
Hmm.
mean, we know he was a
It would
miracle,
not
but come
surprise
on, cut us a little slack for believing.
me. I mean, it's just about perfect, and you talk about use of the principle of economy. I mean, it just so few motivic devices, and he
Yeah,
maximizes them.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I
extraordinary,
played
and
that.
plus the key itself, B minor, and then cadencing
I get a lump in my throat, really. There's not a figure of speech. I get a lump in my throat when I play that piece, particularly if it seems like it's been going well. But the other B minor, this is another one, he used it twice for a piece or for a large section of a piece, and was in this flute quartet that he wrote back in the K200s, which was probably for house music. It's a charming piece.
Or to bail out his buddy Michael Haydn.
Well, the second movement, the strings are playing pizzicato and the flute is playing, and it's in B minor. Now, explaining this, I can't. I really can't. And I've read and I've looked for, and this is the way he felt when he was writing, and he heard what happens. And you know this because I think you compose. I know that you do a lot of arranging, and you are very familiar with the keys that composers of musicals and theater music, the keys that composers use to express. Mozart had some reason for expressing himself in B minor for those two pieces, for F sharp minor in the second movement of the A major concerto 488, and then he never used them again, but he wrote plenty of music that was melancholy. Mm-hmm. And he wrote plenty of music that was second movements of pieces that could have been in unusual keys, but he stayed very close to home. And every now and then he went off on a tangent and used keys that were more used in the Romantic period.
So, you know, in musical theater, we think of keys as being not arbitrary necessarily, but totally functional based on the person who's singing.
Well, that's
the selection of keys has everything to do with vocal range and the actor for whom a role is created. But in this case, I think we think of the keys that composers choose as being specific to a particular mood or what have you. The keys convey particular emotions, that they're unique things about individual keys.
Yeah. Well, there's no explaining, but back to the A minor that we started on, and Julie talks about this so much in her chapter, Melodies of the Mind. And by the way, when she has an incredible dialogue, a play that she wrote, imagining a conversation between Mozart and Sigmund Freud in eternity. It's a beautiful, beautiful, full-length dialogue between the two of them, each discussing their views about music. Freud, who couldn't relate to music, and Mozart, who could only relate to music. And the dialogue can get spiky at times, and it eventually focuses on the A minor sonata that Freud reminded Mozart that he wrote at the time of his mother's death in Paris. Now, we don't know, we know the date that his mother died was July 3rd, 1778. We don't know the genesis of the A minor sonata. It was summer of 1778. But I'm guessing that it was probably after the death, or while the mother was going through her death throes, with the only person to be with her was her son, who was no more equipped to be with her than I don't know what. The E minor violin sonata comes from the same period as the A minor piano sonata. And again, the only time he used the key of E minor that I know of. There may be others. I don't know every work of Mozart. I have that in common with Mozart. I'm sure he didn't know every work that he wrote either.
Well, there's a lot to keep track of.
626 catalog numbers, but how many thousands of sections of pieces? Did I write that? I was 9 when I wrote that. I don't remember writing that. Anyway.
I have a question for you related to personal history, Mozart's personal history. So we know that he studied with Johann Christian Bach
Yeah.
at the ripe old age of 8.
Right.
And they actually reunited when he was in Paris at the time that his mother died. Do you know anything about that interaction, or that personal history with Johann Christian Bach?
I don't know the Paris reconnection. I do know that when Leopold arranged their first tour, when Mozart was 8, and they ended up in London after crossing the English Channel, uh, being seasick for about 4 days afterwards. It was awful.
Hmm.
But Leopold was a prominent violinist and a revered violin teacher, and his treatise, his book on violin playing, is still used today. I mean, more than just history. But he was also an entrepreneur of the highest order, and he knew enough people that he could make connections, and he had 2 talented kids, and he was showing them off. They eventually ended up in London, and they played for royalty, and they played for important musicians, and one of the people that they met was Johann Christian, who had settled after his departure from the Bach family, from the Bach way of life, from Germany, first to Italy, where he became a Catholic, and he started writing operas, and then to London, where he established he with Friedrich Abel, the first concerts, the first in arena where folks like you and me could pay a little bit of money, get a couple of tickets, and come in and hear a wunderkind like Mozart improvise and play with a cloth over the keyboard and play blindfolded. And Johann Christian Bach and Mozart actually worked together. And there I would say that Mozart studied with Johann Christian Bach, which must have been a little bit galling to his father, to Mozart's father. But Mozart got a lot from the lesser composer, but obviously the more mature musician. And his early music, his first piano sonata, which I'm not quite ready to play in public yet, but I've been learning it. It sounds like something out of Johann Christian Bach. He was very, very.
This is the Mozart C major sonata.
Yeah, it's a charming piece.
Hey, Louis, lower your video a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Your, your wonderful fingers playing. There we go. Great.
But this sounds very much like something that you could find in Johann Christian. That's the opening. No great tune there, but an awful lot of just glittery, shiny piano writing, and then there's some humor in it. It's not a great piece, but it's a delightful piece. By the way, I had never even read that through before about 2 weeks ago. I didn't know it, which just tells you how irresponsible I am that I'm talking about Mozart and I didn't know all the piano sonatas, at least in some way. But this is clearly what he got from Johann Christian. But far before that, when Mozart was 9 and 10 and 11 years old, he set 3 of Bach's piano sonatas, one of which, by the way, I played here at Carytown about a year ago, the Opus 6, number 1, the D major. Mozart set that, reset it as a piano concerto. He orchestrated, no violas, so it's violins and cellos and continuo, and a piano solo.
Is that true that the first four keyboard concertos that Mozart composed were actually pastiche
Yeah,
pieces that he
I
had
think it was
taken, he
five.
had converted
There was
rock sonatas? Yeah.
three by Bach, two or maybe even three other composers whose names I know their names. They've just gone out the back door. I can't remember.
It's a nice exercise for a 6-year-old.
Well, he didn't have to write the viola clef, but he was playing. I suspect he wasn't playing the viola. He probably didn't have half-size violas for the little kid who couldn't maybe reach
Yeah,
that far. But
yeah.
Adjust your screen back, Louis, so we can see your whole.
yes,
There we go. That's better.
that's not the technique that I have under my fingers.
I know. We're all learning this.
But the idea that Mozart could understand and manufacture a concerto with the appropriate tutti. I've actually taught that to a youngster, and I actually used it again with an adult who at the time was older than I and had a certain deficit with arthritis. And I suggested that to this person, and suggested it to her, and she learned it to the point where she could get some friends together and play it as a concerto. They're fabulous teaching pieces because the Bach music is good. That sonata that I played is good. There's another one in E major that I didn't play that's even better. And the other from Opus 6 are very nice. By the time Mozart writes the second of the sonatas, I think he's already surpassed Bach. Again, a wonderful, vigorous piece. I forgot to it. Could you see that? No, okay. Yeah.
Yes, we got it.
There's already an advance from the second sonata where there's a good tune and not quite so much Czerny etude going on. First movement of the C major sounds more like a very good Czerny etude.
And that brought back fond memories. I think we spent maybe a couple lessons working on that F major sonata.
I love
And
that
also
sonata.
an unusual second movement because it's in F sharp minor, right? Yeah.
Something like that. I had that.
So from F major to F minor. It's pretty staggering.
Beautiful. And then the second theme is an A flat, again, a key that he rarely explored. So, yeah, he had a lifelong relationship with Johann Christian Bach so far as musical influence. And one of my favorite quotes of Mozart is very brief, but he was talking not about Johann Christian, but about his older brother, Carl Philipp Emanuel, a composer that I believe is one of the most least appreciated, the most unsung heroes of the world of classical music. And he said this in the presence of his father, his Leopold. Mozart said about Carl Philipp Emanuel, "He is the father, we are the children." I suspect he got a spanking from Leopold that night. But the thing about Mozart, we know him as a kind of well, he was a child prodigy from the age of 4, and everyone who knew him knew that. And this was great until he was about 15 or 16, when you stop being a child, when you start growing a beard and mustache, and the hormones start flying all over the place, maybe you're not a child prodigy anymore. But he was still remembered as that little kid that came through here 5 years ago and played with the blindfold on. And he was already writing operas and concertos and symphonies on his own. And he also, unfortunately, had the capacity to recognize the deficits in just about everybody else on the scene. That did not make him popular with just about everybody else on the scene, including Salieri. And great stories have come. But
he also possessed the smarts to take advantage of the people who did have something to offer, like Johann Christoph and Franz Joseph Haydn, those contemporaries that he respected.
Yeah, Haydn he respected. There was a Czech composer named Myslivovich, not known today, but apparently the hot composer during Mozart's lifetime. And Mozart and Joseph Myslivovich knew the family and was very helpful to him until he reneged on a business deal about putting on an opera. And Leopold was miffed about that. But there were a few people that Mozart did respect. But unfortunately, what he said about Clementi is unfortunate. You know, he was a mere charlatan. Clementi wasn't a charlatan. Beethoven regarded Clementi with great esteem, and so does everybody else. But Mozart just was jealous as hell of him because he had thirds in both hands.
Oh, wow.
And he writes them.
You and I had a conversation recently about Mozart literature and finding evidence of particular tricks or idiosyncrasies. And remember, but that was interesting to me because I had just had a conversation with some of my students about writers like Jason Robert Brown, this is musical theater, Harvey Schmidt, really good pianist composers who incorporate in much of their writing just tricks and technical things that are unique to them, and that it's a challenge for everybody else who tries to realize those. But I thought that was so interesting to think of that literature as somehow getting closer to Mozart or having that connection to see what he would have been like as a pianist, as a performer.
Well, you have to consider also the instrument, which was quite different from this Baldwin baby grand that I have here, or the big Steinway that I have in the other room, in the living room. But what he understood, irrespective of the instrument, was sonority. Now, I don't mean loud and soft, but it might be appropriate now for me to play the first movement of that A minor sonata.
Okay.
I think that's a great transition.
You get a sense of sonority, and you get a sense of the way he used the piano. And believe me, I've never performed this on a Mozart piano, but I have played it. And what you hear in the middle section with the bass just thundering away kind of sounds like a loud roar. On a Mozart piano, it is crystal clear. And you can hear the contrapuntal value of what you're going to hear in the middle section of this first movement. Let me play that for you. I'll remember to do that.
Great.
This was
So this is the A minor sonata, Crucial 310.
Yeah, the first movement. I won't, for time's sake, I won't take the repeat, but that piano bench, I think I said it weighs almost as much as the piano. But the sound you get, forget zoom and forget all of that. There's a kind of a big sound, but no matter what I do, it lacks the kind of clarity that you got on Mozart's piano, and his fingers must have been second to none ever, because this piece is filled with that kind of figure work, along with the big sonority of the big chords. That was a little better. Could have been
Bravo.
better, but what I wanted to point out, and it's just ironic that the passage that I played wrong the first time, well, they don't know that I did it the first time. So
Okay.
Yeah, that never happened.
We can cut out this part of the conversation too if you want.
the part that I want you to hear is this on the grand piano. This sounds like just noise. And you have to use pedal or the right hand doesn't connect.
Mm.
But that makes this. That just, on the clarity of Mozart, when the Stein piano or whatever he was using, I don't know what he was using, it comes out sounding an octave lower. It's with that kind of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
He's opening. You hear the counterpoint. You can hear that rather than just kind of crushing chords. You hear it a lot better. So even though this piece is cacophonous in a way, it was cacophony with absolute clarity. And that's very, very hard to achieve on a concert grand today.
Louis, when you're teaching, do you try to teach your students and also in your own playing to emulate those earlier instruments then on this more modern piano to the best that you can, or do you just say, you know what, it's a different instrument, we have to do it differently?
It would be kind of like trying to teach my cat to say, hello, master, how are you?
Okay, it's just impossible.
But I wish you could learn that. But with the students, they need to hear what the possibilities are, what the possibilities you're working for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing. If if I'm going to play, oh, let's just say, F sharp major prelude from book 1 of the Well-Tempered Clavier. I can't make that sound like a harpsichord or a
Right.
clavichord, whichever he might have written it for.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to make it sound like very intimate sound on the piano, which would mean very little pedal. You want to wash the sound. You want it to be individual notes and each note speaking. And any kind of crescendo when you go from F sharp to to C sharp, you don't want this to be a 19th century crescendo. You want it to be what you feel inside, a small crescendo. We're moving up a fifth.
Fascinating.
And you have to, first of all, you have to hear. Pedagogy involves listening. Playing the piano involves listening. Singing, you know this very well, Monica. Singing involves listening. You have to be able to hear what it is that you know you can't do. If you really wanted to sound like Bach, first of all, you couldn't do this. You might do this. That would have been an F sharp major sound on Bach's instrument.
Right.
It's pretty. It's pretty. That's the tone, the note vibrations per second that he would have heard.
Right. And listening helps give you that frame of reference.
But for him, that sound was our F sharp.
Right.
And it has to have clarity. You can't play it as if it were in E major. You have to play it in F major and have a clarity of touch. So you certainly wouldn't be playing. That would be nice maybe for a Rachmaninoff phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Louis, the sonata that you just shared is so unusual, in part because of the demands that it places on the left hand, at least in terms of the
Yeah.
Mozart canon.
Yeah.
But they really are equal partners, and it's not just your conventional classical homophonic writing, that we've got two very independent lines working. I was struck by the moment right before the recapitulation where there's a trading of rhythms. The left
Yeah.
hand has the sixteenths, and the right hand has the dotted trills, and then they switch.
Yeah.
What advice would you offer a student? Just because it's unusual writing for Mozart.
Mm-hmm.
They could play 311 instead of 310. You don't have that problem. It's a harder sonata, believe me, but you don't have that problem. So, let me find that spot. What's hard is so first play it without the trill. Feel that. Then maybe throw an extra note. Keep the rhythm of the trill. And I was practicing at that last night because I haven't played this in a while and it was slipping a little bit. I know what I want, but I wasn't getting it. The E and the B have to coalesce. So you practice it maybe when leaving out the trill, but making sure that the after the Nachschlag, if you want to give a fancy term for it, comes at exactly the right time. Well, it's not an impression. It's not sort of a throw it in. It's got to be precise. Then in the left hand.
Right.
I'm not doing it right. But it has to be timed exactly. And you have to practice just that. And then, as you may remember, I may have suggested this to you, instead of just that passage, always practice difficult passages by starting with the hardest part and then fanning out on either side of it. Because you're not practicing an issue, you're practicing an issue in a context.
Right.
Right.
And that gets overlooked a lot in practice. I can do that.
Yeah, that was one thing. That was a huge takeaway. I work with you, Louis, is how to practice and how to do it efficiently. And that has been, a godsend as I've gotten older and time is of the essence more and more. And how do you strategize? How do you do it in a smart way and an efficacious way? So I'm always so grateful and appreciative for those lessons.
We could spend a lot of time on that, and I often think about that. And the problem is the practicing is as personal as your choice of clothing, or as your it's a very personal thing. So if I tell you to do something, it's based on a principle that has to be mastered, rather than this is the method. You know this, and I get more pushback on this than anything else I do, and may not agree with it, but I do not advocate hand-separate practice, because it denies the learning of the piece. You can play the right hand beautifully. You can play the left hand beautifully, but your ear has got to learn the piece, and your soul has got to practice growing with the piece. So that when the left hand does get off, as it did with me, you didn't know that I goofed up that passage. I don't mind if that gets on the broadcast tomorrow. You don't know that I goofed up. I have to know where I am when I make the inevitable mistake.
What I can say, I certainly didn't know, but I was mesmerized by this interplay between your right and left hand. I only dabble at playing, but that was absolutely remarkable to me. And it really did seem like the perfect passing off of a baton. And it's interesting to me that you say that it's that coalescing, practicing the joining of it, that joining moment that helps the springboard to the other hand, or the back and forth. I think it's really interesting, and I was very, very taken with it in your playing.
It's a piece that, no matter how much I love it and how often I think I have played it, it comes back to bite you where you least expect it. And I think that's characteristic of so much Mozart. One other thought about this is that I found a lot of students, start with the statistics. So far as I know, in my 47 years at Michigan, I do know this: I don't think any piano student ever won a piano competition, concerto competition with Mozart. I had 2 make the finals, but nobody ever won. And the trouble is with that if you're looking for sheer difficulty, Mozart is as hard, if not harder, than nearly everybody else. But he's not going to stand up to the Rachmaninoff third or the Prokofiev second, those by now war horses of concerto competition repertoire.
Because
it's, first of all, it's too
the
damn
drama is
transparent.
okay.
I mean, this is such a simple thing to play. it does not take a virtuoso to play that, but it takes a virtuoso to appreciate how transparently it can be played. And after the orchestral tutti, how beautiful your opening, how fresh your opening sound is, and how beautiful it is. So you have to practice the physicality of almost reticence. You can't do this. That's a great opener. You get rid of all your nervousness on those. I'm not mad anymore. I'm not nervous anymore. I don't want to play this anymore.
You feel like that's one of the things that bridges the gap between Baroque music and the Romantic period, is that the creation of the forte piano, for one thing, introduces dynamics that the harpsichord didn't possess, but it still carries over the importance of articulation and the cleanliness of articulation.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the challenges of Mozart that you don't encounter in later rep, is that approach to a note is still so vitally important that we encounter in Baroque music.
And he wrote very clearly when he became a mature composer. The early pieces are not so much, but even in the 279, the C major that I quoted a little bit of there, he is very precise about where he wants the phrase to go. And I'm assuming that these markings are Mozart that I have in the Universal Edition. The footnotes, and they all comment that this is not some editor assuming, like a Schirmer's edition might be. And he's very precise. He's not always consistent. If a phrase repeats, he doesn't do it the same way. And then you have to think, did he mean that to be different? He's writing a lot of music.
Yeah.
Surely there's some errors here. But
and playing billiard shots and,
I'm sorry?
having a glass of wine. And playing billiard shots at the same time, or
Yeah.
having a glass of wine with his buddies.
Yeah. I'm sure he was a good billiards player, and the music just distracted him from Caron shots. But he is very specific, and when you realize he brought that specificity to 41 symphonies and 22 operas and 27 piano concertos and 18 quartets, he wasn't leaving it up the way Bach did to the performer's interpretive power. He is telling you what to do. And you should feel responsible, not just to getting to the right notes, but with the right affect inside you. That's hard.
One other question I wanted to pose to you, because he was so busy and he had his fingers in so many different types of musical pies, it's interesting to note the gaps in his writing of solo piano music.
Yeah.
That we have a long period where he's writing a lot of piano concertos because he's trying to make money doing that, or he's writing a lot of operas. But it seems like the sonatas appear in groups, in chunks, which is interesting because we see him develop as a composer. What insight do you bring to that?
I don't know. It's a great question, Tyler, and I haven't researched. It's not the first time I've heard the question, but I haven't researched it to the point where I can give you a knowing answer. But I certainly know that the first 6 sonatas he played. First he improvised them and then he wrote them down.
Yeah.
I think it's very likely that the 309, 310, 311, at least some of those, I don't know about 310, but 309, that's the one that he said came to his head all of a sudden full of din and fury. It's not exactly a din and fury sonata. It's one of his less successful sonatas. But 311 is a firebrand. It's a concerto.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he played these pieces. And I suspect that even 330, 331, 32, and 33, he was still playing. But after that, he may not have been playing He may have been conducting, and he may have been writing operas and overseeing his operas uh, and larger works. And the piano became, perhaps, I'm guessing, but I hope it's an informed guess, became less important personally to him.
Mm.
And yet, when he does go back to writing the sonatas, 475, 457, the fantasy and C minor fantasy and sonata, this is a big work that he would have had to have played, because I don't think anybody else at the time could play it.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned in your email to me yesterday this little thing. It's almost childlike. It's along with. So maybe, I'm just guessing that maybe he had a student, because he was sort of in the position, I don't think he objected terribly to teaching the way Beethoven, I think, did. But it may have been a burden to him to have to stop working on the Marriage of Figaro to teach.
That's how it sounded if I played it.
I'm guessing. I
So would you say that what I'm sort of gleaning from this is that young pianists often begin with Mozart, but you don't truly, a pianist doesn't truly, only seasoned pianists truly come to understand Mozart.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's another interesting factor that hit me, like that F major sonata that I earlier quoted. That was the first Mozart sonata I was given. I was, what, 12, maybe a little younger. I hated it. I confess before my whatever audience is out there, I confess I hated it.
That last
Why?
movement is so charming, though. It's
So
got
how
such
do you feel about it now?
I love it. And I played it when I came back to, I think I was in my 50s, which I'm beginning fadingly to remember my 50s. But I played it at Carytown. It was the first time I played it since I was a little boy.
Hmm.
And I came back to it realizing that I spent a lifetime thinking, well, look, I played that as a kid, and I'm not playing kid stuff anymore. I'm playing big Schumann fantasy, and I'm playing Brahms sonata and Brahms Paganini. I'm not going to play 280 K280 of Mozart.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time to realize that, yeah, those pieces are great and you love them, and I hope I can still play some of those pieces. But I can also play the simple, transparent, beautiful work of a master composer who wrote that probably, maybe he wasn't playing billiards. He was on tour, one of his three before independence, his own independence tours. But he must have improvised that, and then with his memory wrote down and refined a little bit, and they weren't published. The first 6 were not published in his lifetime. So, but he thought they were valuable enough. So I didn't want to revert to my own being a kid.
Right.
So I think there was some personal antagonism on my part, which may be what happens with other people. And then you come, I don't know what the tipping point is, where you come back to realizing that childlike is also deeply mature. It's art, it can be artistry. But you learn that from Mozart, and you learn that from Haydn.
one thing I admire so much about those early sonatas. You mentioned before that they were probably improvised, and to me, they always possess a certain spontaneity. And there are later sonatas too, like the last movement of 333, the B flat sonata, that looks forward to larger concerto forms with that cadenza at the end. But that just, I think, speaks to the ever freshness of this music and how it was conceived, in the moment.
That sonata, to me, that is the opera of the sonatas.
Hmm.
333, and it's singing. It's singing from the beginning to the end. I want to try, maybe close. I did not practice this.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I practiced the A minor, but I did not practice this. But since you mentioned it yesterday, I was thinking about it last night. Do we have time for me to try the last
We will
movement of
make time.
333?
We will make time, Louis.
Oh, of
I'll
course.
use a score, but I truly, I'm not. I guess I'm asking for sympathy here. But it is so beautiful. It is so lovely.
I don't think it's warranted.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Whoops.
So Tyler, you suggested this? Which piece
Yes, I was thinking like middle period
Okay.
Mozart. What would be fun? I was thinking maybe one of the rondo movements of a middle sonata.
All right. Well,
It's so much fun, and it's got
bug
such
in his ear. In his brain, I should say.
a. Plus, it shows Mozart's sense of humor, I think.
It
Okay.
shows that I'm a glutton for punishment or something, but I truly love this movie. I love this whole sonata, but it's been true. I think it's been decades since I've played it. So
Okay.
if it's not so good, we don't have to put it down.
Have you ever performed it, Louis?
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
I did. But again, there's this thing. I don't like to go back to things. More recently I have, but there's so much I don't know. I don't want to go back to something when there's all of that out there and so little time to do it.
Yeah.
That's not an ominous statement. That's just fact. I mean,
Fact of life.
a lifetime will not, a good lifetime is not going to encompass the repertoire.
Mhm.
But this last movement is so special. Not too bad
Thank
after
you,
about
Louis.
Not at all. That was
20
fantastic.
years. Not, you know,
Well,
it's so beautiful, and yeah, there's some things that I wouldn't want to do in a public performance that I want to clean up. But it was so nice to get back to a piece that I really haven't thought of in a very long time.
so thank you for that, Tyler.
Well, thank you, Louis, for sharing that. It was
Next
fantastic.
time, you're buying the coffee, though.
Coffee is on me. Absolutely.
Well, I think
Written
that's
by a latte.
yeah, I think this is a good place for us to wrap up and just I would like to just thank you all for joining us, Carytown Concert House patrons, and especially thank you, Louis Nagel and Tyler Driskill, for such an engaging conversation about Mozart and demonstrations from you, Louis, and all of your wisdom, and Tyler, your wonderful questions. Um,
If I get up and you see,
yes. Oh, and there we have yes, your assistant.
that, that's
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 wonderful.
that's Steinway. That's our cat Steinway.
You could have done two hands, two paws.
Right. So we've given you all a glimpse of what so many professors and students are going through these days, music professors and music students. It's just all a part of what we're all doing in the arts to keep the music playing. And thank you for being a part of that today.
Well, I've got to thank Carytown for being here and doing what you're doing. I'm so happy to be part of it. You know that.
I do know that, and we're grateful and we're honored.
Abby, thank
Monica, the
you for all
programming
that
that
you've
you've all
done.
put together, you and your fantastic staff, has been fantastic. I mean, for patron supporters of the arts, but also the musicians and the professional artists in this community, to keep things going and to provide that service for the community. It's
Well,
invaluable. Thank you.
It's, it's important, and it's our mission, and it's an important one. And so comments like that really help us keep going. And I wish you all a beautiful evening. Thank you again for doing this for us, and to the patrons for joining us.
Thank you, Monica.
Bye.
Thank you, Louis. Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us for Live at the 415. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to read about upcoming live streamed concerts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified about our newest videos and upcoming live streams. Have a good evening.
I've got a kawaii, which I can mute and put the earphones on, which I did for a long time. I called it my kawaii piano.